Welcome to the fourth and final section of boosting your React productivity with Webpack. In the previous section, we have discussed a few React-specific topics as well as Webpack Dev Server in order to improve your productivity when creating React applications. In this section, we will talk all about deployments and how we can use Webpack to deploy your applications. We will provide a good overview of deploying both static and dynamic sites. We will talk a bit more about the differences between them and look at the most common platform you could deploy your React application on with Webpack. First of all, we will talk about building our application and what we need to do to get the app production ready. After that, we will quickly cover GitHub Pages and how we can deploy our app to GitHub Pages very easily. Then we will also look at deploying static application to AWS S3. So we will just host an app in our bucket and make sure we have the configuration set up so that the bucket can serve the files. After that, for more complex applications that also involve deploying a backend, we will look at Node and Webpack integration and how we can integrate the server into our Webpack projects. And at the end, we will also look at deploying dynamic sites to AWS. In the first part, let's have a look at what do we need to do in order to get our application production ready. So if you remember in the previous section, we have built our application, we have optimized it, now we need to be able to deploy it. So first of all, I will quickly go with you through the differences between static app and server deployments. We will see the main distinction between those two types of processes. Then we will quickly update our config files with some pre-deploy configurations and talk about what we need to do there. And then we will also update our build scripts so that we can build a production-ready app and create a production-ready bundle.js. So first of all, let's talk about a statically served application. Basically, a static application is a project in which Webpack produces a built app that consists of our index.html file as well as our bundle.js, vendor.js, and any other chunks that we've generated. So basically just the HTML and all the JavaScript required for application. And then this app is exactly what runs inside the user's browser. So we have no server component, we have no corresponding backend for this type of application. Of course, if we need to connect this application to a backend API, we can do that, and that backend API is developed separately, but is not tied to get into this application. So basically, with static assets applications, you have your app containing your files that you're exported, and that is exactly what runs in the user's browsers. Now, on the other option, the other hand, we have more complex applications which also involve a backend component. In this case, we will have our front-end application, so it's exactly the same as the static files. However, there is an extra layer between our application and the user browsers, which is the server. This server can be pretty much anything, can be a Node server, Ruby Rails, a .NET server, Django, anything else like that. And this server will be used to serve these pre-built assets, but it can also be used to handle things like accessing a database, user authentication, and so on. In this case, the user browsers will always will primarily interact with our server, and then the server will provide the browser with our static assets that we generate with Webpack. So when talking about Webpack deployments, we need to consider whether we have a static front-end application or if we need to also consider a backend server as well. Most of the times, what is recommended is to go with pure front-end applications, basically just have a static application, and then the backend for your service can be developed separately, and the app can interact with the backend via some sort of API. So this is my preferred method of deploying applications. So let's quickly go over some of the providers that you can deploy your application with, and then let's have a look at what we need to do with Webpack before we can deploy. Now, there are a few differences between the platforms. However, handling the Webpack part of the project is mostly the same for all of them. Let's quickly go through a few examples of static sites deployments. First of all, we will talk about GitHub Pages, which is obviously supported by GitHub. It's a one of GitHub products, and it makes it really easy for you to deploy and serve a static application. You can find more information about it at pages.github.com. Then another really easy way for you to store a static front-end only application is to use an Amazon S3 bucket and configure it so that it can serve files to the web. You can also use some of Microsoft Azure. Again, as I said, this is up to preference and it depends a lot on the rest of your project where you decide to store it. And we will also go for server-based applications in which we need to deploy a server as well. We'll also have a look at the Amazon EC2 instances, as well as the Elastic Block Store from Amazon and how to deploy it in there as well. Keep in mind, you can also deploy server applications to other services such as Microsoft Azure or even Heroku or anything like that. So with that out of the way, let's go into our project, into our code, and let's make the necessary requirements into our Webpack config.js as well as our package.json in order to get our application production ready. So in Webpack config.js, we will need to go all the way to the bottom into our plugins. As you can see here, we have our HTML Webpack plugin, our Optimize Commons Chunk plugin, as well as our Hot Module Replacement plugin for quick React development. We will create a new plugin here, and I will just type this out and then explain it to you. So we will need to create a new webpack.define plugin. And in here, we will pass the config objects and make sure you type this in exactly as I do. So we will have a process.env.node.env. And this one, we will do json.stringify. And then in here, we will do process.env.node.env. Now, this might not necessarily make a lot of sense right now, but let's go over why we need this added into our config file. First of all, in our project, we have several libraries, including React.js. Those libraries make use of this node.env flag that we have defined in here. When React runs, it will always look for a Windows scope variable called process.env.node.env. If this variable is equal to production, React will behave a little differently than it does in development. The biggest difference will be that React will do fewer error checking and warning procedure while it renders your application. This is obviously preferable in production because you don't want to overload the user's browsers with any errors or so. However, in development, you want to keep all the error reporting that React has by default. So to achieve this, we will make use of Webpack's define plugin. This basically just lets us define a Windows scope variable that will be defined whenever bundle.js runs. So whenever your app gets loaded into a browser, Webpack's define plugin will set this window variable to whatever we tell it to. Now, the node.env is a variable that we need to set on our machine on our own before making any builds deployments. So we'll have a look at how to do that as well. So let's save our webpack config.js and let's go back into our package.json. As you can see, now we have the dev script, the clean, and the build. Let's make a few changes to our build script so that we can build the application in production mode. So first of all, we will need to define the node.env variable, as I mentioned before. So we will just define it as node.env equals production. So this way, no spaces in here. This way, Webpack will know to define this global variable as production. Now we will also do an end. We'll run our yarn clean script as well, just so we clean all the dist folder. And then we will also run Webpack. However, instead of running it with the flag -d, we will run it with a flag -p, which stands for production. Let's save our package JSON. And now we have everything we need to make sure that whenever the project is built, Webpack will know that this is the production version. If we do not add this node env equals production and Webpack -p, Webpack will always assume the build is a development build. Now, this -p at the end will also tell Webpack we want production version of our project, and this will mean that Webpack will automatically minify the JS code and it will automatically compact our code into the minimum size possible. Well, this will increase the build time. It will also ensure the production assets are significantly smaller, sometimes even 30 to 40% smaller than our development file. So with all this config added, let's go into our terminal and run our script. Keep in mind that this production build will take significantly longer than our dev builds. So let's do a quick comparison of that. Let's build our project with Webpack -d, which is the development build. And as you can see, in this case, it has created all of our chunks and everything. And now let us also run the new build script. So we will do that by running yarn build. And now this time you'll see we set the node env to production. We'll do yarn clean and then a webpack -p. As you can see, it's taking a bit longer to build, so it took almost double the time of the previous one to build. However, now we have all the chunks have been minified and our project is ready to be deployed in production. So in this video, we have looked at the main differences between deploying static asset and custom server deployments. We have also looked at a few of the most common providers for hosting both static assets and server-based applications. Then we have updated our webpacks with some pre-deploy configs, and we have also updated our build script. Now that our app has been built for production, we're ready to start deploying it.